Have you ever stopped to think about what it means to be someone? Since childhood, we're told we must become someone in life. Build a career, start a family, leave a legacy. But what if this constant pursuit of being someone isn't a necessity but a trap? An idea we created to feel important, while the real meaning of life might lie in becoming no one. This idea can feel unsettling at first. After all, no one wants to feel irrelevant or lose their sense of self. We're driven by the need to prove our worth, to stand out among billions of people. But what if the secret to freedom isn't in being special, but in letting go of the need to be someone? Let's explore this provocation together. Throughout this video, we'll delve into science, philosophy, and existential questions. We'll challenge our assumptions about who we are and why we endlessly seek a purpose. Perhaps by the end, you'll see that being no one isn't the emptiness you fear, but the freedom you've been searching for. Ready to embark on this journey? Being someone. It sounds simple, yet it's layered with complexities. From a young age, we're taught that being someone means having a recognized name, an admirable job, or noteworthy achievements. This shapes our view of success and purpose. But who decides what it means to be someone? Is it truly our choice, or are we just following what's been imposed upon us? Our identity isn't something we're born with. It's built over time, shaped by our surroundings, culture, and the people around us. Society's expectations tell us we need labels: student, worker, parent, friend. Each role carries weight, expectations of how we should act. And deep down, we start questioning, is this who I really am? With social media, this quest for identity has become even more pronounced. We're encouraged to stand out, to showcase the best versions of ourselves. Likes and followers become metrics of our worth. But does this make us more authentic? Or does it only amplify the pressure to be someone in the eyes of others? Sometimes it feels like a race to prove ourselves. This constant striving to be someone can be exhausting. We try to meet expectations, but something always seems to be missing. The feeling of never being enough follows us. Here's the question: are we truly living our lives, or just trying to check off a list of requirements we didn't choose? Perhaps being someone is a trap we've built for ourselves. But if being someone can imprison us, what happens when we stop trying? Could we find freedom by letting go of these expectations? In the next chapter, we'll dive into the science behind the self and explore how the me we hold on to might just be an illusion created by our brains. After all, who are we really? Have you ever wondered what the self truly is? Neuroscience suggests that this sense of identity might be an illusion. Our brain tirelessly works to create a narrative that convinces us we are a unique and constant entity. In reality, this identity is a mosaic of memories, experiences, and external influences, organized to feel like a cohesive story. Research shows that the self is a product of brain activity. For instance, studies of patients with brain damage reveal how their perception of identity can drastically change. Memory, personality, and even a sense of continuity can be altered, suggesting that the self isn't as solid as we believe. If identity is this flexible, can we even claim it truly exists as we imagine? Our brain is, at its core, a storyteller. It interprets sensory information and constructs a sense of continuity to help us navigate the world. But this continuity is a tool, not an absolute truth. The self you feel now isn't the same self from years ago. So, who are you really? Perhaps just a fleeting reflection of how your brain organizes the present. This construction of the self isn't inherently bad. It helps us make decisions and engage with the world. But it can become a prison when we cling to it too tightly. If we believe our identity is fixed and unchangeable, we begin to fear transformation and define ourselves solely by who we were. This attachment limits us and keeps us from exploring other possibilities. But what if we stopped holding on to the self so tightly? By viewing the self as a tool, rather than something permanent, we can make room for a new kind of freedom. We don't have to remain trapped in a narrative that may not even be entirely ours. This idea might seem radical, but it prepares us for the next step, understanding what philosophers like Nietzsche and Sartre have to say about the freedom of being no one. Philosophy has long wrestled with the meaning of being. Friedrich Nietzsche, for instance, spoke of the death of God, which wasn't about the literal end of a deity, but the collapse of traditional values that shaped our identities. Without these values, we face a void. For many, this void feels terrifying. But for Nietzsche, it's an opportunity to create new meaning, a radical form of freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre, another great thinker, argued that we are condemned to be free. According to him, life doesn't come with a manual, leaving us with the responsibility to craft our own purpose. But there's a catch. This freedom can feel overwhelming, especially when we're fixated on being someone. Letting go of that fixation allows us to embrace true freedom. Nihilism, often seen as negative, can actually be optimistic. By accepting that nothing has inherent meaning, we open ourselves to create our own purpose without constraints. Imagine the liberation of not having to prove anything to anyone. Being no one doesn't mean being insignificant. It means being free to explore every possibility life offers. So, what does it mean to be nothing? It's not about vanishing or giving up on life. Instead, it's about letting go of the attachment to a fixed identity. Nietzsche called this overcoming the ego, leaving behind the self we've constructed, and embracing the unknown. It's like a blank canvas, where we can rewrite who we are moment by moment, free from the chains of the past or societal expectations. This concept also appears in spiritual practices like Zen Buddhism, which teaches the dissolution of the ego. Practitioners believe that true freedom comes from realizing the self is an illusion. By letting go of this identity, they find a connection to the greater whole, experiencing unity with the universe. In this context, being no one means being everything. Perhaps the greatest fear of being nothing is the fear of losing relevance. But does relevance truly matter in a universe this vast? Philosophy invites us to ponder, what if freedom isn't about being important, but about not needing to be? Let's take this question further as we explore the existential dilemmas that arise from letting go. Why are we so afraid of being no one? This fear is rooted in one of humanity's deepest existential dilemmas, the desire for relevance and meaning. Since we became aware of our mortality, we've sought ways to leave a mark on the world, to ensure that our existence matters. But does this pursuit of legacy truly bring us peace? Or does it just fuel our anxiety? The search for meaning is both a psychological necessity and a potential trap. Psychologists like Viktor Frankl have argued that finding purpose helps us endure suffering. But what if we're looking for meaning in the wrong places? Too often, we tie our sense of purpose to what we achieve or how others perceive us. This can lead us to live lives that feel inauthentic. Consider the paradox of anonymity. At first glance, the idea of being no one seems terrifying, as though it strips away all value from our lives. But what if it's the opposite? By letting go of the need to be remembered or recognized, we can finally live in the present moment. We can appreciate life for what it is, instead of constantly worrying about how we'll be judged in the future. Spiritual and philosophical traditions have long advocated for detachment as a path to inner peace. Zen Buddhism, for instance, teaches that happiness doesn't come from accumulating achievements or identities, but from embracing impermanence. Everything is temporary, including the idea of who we think we are. By accepting this, we can find a freedom that no material success can provide. However, letting go of the self doesn't mean letting go of others. In fact, by abandoning our obsession with personal identity, we can connect more deeply with those around us. No longer competing or seeking validation, we become more present, more human. These genuine connections often hold the real meaning we've been searching for. So how do we deal with the fear of losing our identity? The first step is to accept that our identity was never fixed to begin with. Just as our cells and memories change over time, so does our sense of self. Instead of resisting these changes, we can embrace them as a natural part of being human. The freedom of being no one isn't emptiness. It's an open space to explore. This brings us to a broader reflection. If the universe itself has no inherent purpose, who says we need one? Perhaps meaning isn't something we discover. It's something we create every day. In the next chapter, we'll explore how society keeps us trapped in the illusion of being someone, and how we can begin to break free from this cycle. We live in a society that constantly pushes us to be someone. From an early age, we're taught that our value is tied to what we achieve, what we do, and how others perceive us. This pressure isn't just cultural. It's embedded in how we measure success. But does this pursuit of external validation truly bring freedom? Or does it keep us trapped in an illusion? Social media has amplified this need to prove ourselves. Likes, followers, and shares have become the new currency of significance. We're made to believe that the more visible we are online, the more valuable we are as individuals. But what happens when those numbers fall short of our expectations? Many of us become stuck in an endless cycle of seeking validation that never feels enough. This race for relevance often pulls us away from our authentic selves. We spend so much time crafting an image for others that we lose touch with what genuinely brings us joy. Society offers us rigid definitions of success, but do we really need to follow them? Perhaps the first step to freedom is questioning these standards and redefining what truly matters. Breaking free from these expectations isn't easy. There's a social cost to not playing the game. Choosing not to chase fame or recognition can make us seem unusual, or even like failures in the eyes of others. But by letting go of the need to be someone, we gain something far more valuable: the time and energy to focus on what truly gives us peace and fulfillment. Society will always try to pull us back into the race. Yet the true revolution lies in rejecting that race and finding meaning in simpler, more authentic experiences. We don't need to be known to be whole. In fact, the more we try to be someone, the more we risk losing the chance to simply be. So, how do we escape this prison? It's not an instant process, but it starts with small steps. Spending less time online, investing in real relationships, and focusing on the present rather than how we're perceived. In the final chapter, we'll explore how the power of being no one can unlock a kind of freedom we never thought possible. We've reached the end of this journey, but the reflection is just beginning. Throughout this video, we've uncovered how the relentless pursuit of being someone can act as a trap disguised as freedom. The identity we cling to is often an illusion, shaped by societal expectations. Yet by letting go of this need, we open ourselves to something far greater: the freedom to be authentic. Being no one doesn't mean disappearing or giving up on life. On the contrary, it's an invitation to live fully, without the weight of labels or external validation. It's the realization that we don't need to prove anything to anyone. That meaning doesn't come from a fixed identity, but from the choices we make moment by moment. So, what's the next step? Perhaps it's time to look inward and ask yourself, what truly matters to me beyond what others expect? The freedom of being no one isn't about emptiness. It's about discovering a space where you can simply exist and embrace life as it is. In the end, being no one might not be the end, but the beginning of a lighter, freer existence. What will you choose?